What's up, guys? I want to talk about some smartphones that I don't get to talk about a lot, but these phones have gotten some pretty good price drops, and these are going to be flagship phones that I think you guys should definitely consider. So first is the S22 Ultra. This is a fantastic phone, especially with the price drop. You can find this in very good condition for around $524 on eBay and Amazon, and it's still a fantastic phone. It basically still has the same design as the S23 Ultra, and just with slightly different. But it's got the aluminum frame, it's IP68 dust and water resistant, and of course it's got the built-in stylus, and it's still a very nice looking phone. So that's one thing that I absolutely love about this phone. And then also you pretty much have the same display. It's a 6.8-inch dynamic AMOLED display, 120 Hz HDR10 plus, 1750 nits peak brightness, 1440p, 500 for the PPI. Honestly, one of the best displays still that you can find. Has that very boxy look that basically looks like a TV, and it's still, like I said, a fantastic panel to watch content on. This phone does have Android 13, One UI 5.1, and this phone launched with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 processor, so it's still a very fast phone. Like I said, compared to the S23 Ultra, as far as performance goes, it's not a massive performance jump. It's still going to feel essentially the same, so that's why I really like this phone. Also, you do have 128 gigs of internal storage, 8 gigs of RAM, but you can pretty much easily find the 256 and 12 gigs for around that same price as well too. So stereo speakers on here. Now the stereo speakers aren't crazy good on here. That's one upgrade Samsung did make with the S23, but overall I think it's fine for most people to be able to watch content on. Even if you cover the bottom speaker, they're just not super loud. So you do have the under the display fingerprint sensor and essentially all the same things as far as Samsung desktop support, and basically all the same software features with the S Pen and all that good stuff. So the cameras on here, comparing this phone to the S23 Ultra, you're not really going to notice too much of a difference at all, really. So it's got a 108 megapixel standard, a 10 megapixel periscope telephoto that does 10 times optical zoom, and a 10 megapixel telephoto lens that does 3 times optical zoom. They have a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It still does the full 100 times zoom. It's using 8K 24, 40 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 60. Like I said, you're essentially getting a still a flagship camera. The only real difference with the camera from this one and the S23 is that you have the 200 megapixel now, but just trust me, the photos and video are still essentially the same, so you're still getting top-notch quality on here. So the battery life on the S22 Ultra, it's not terrible. This is another area where Samsung made a big leap. It's just average, so around 6 hours of screen on time is what I was getting with the S22. It has 45-watt charging on here, wireless and reverse wireless charging. Absolutely fantastic device to pick up for $500. I mean, it just beats a lot of mid-rangers you would pay for at that price. I just really like this phone for this price. I think it's a great deal. Another phone you guys should check out is the Asus Zenfone 9. Now this phone originally launched like around $600 or something like that, and now it's come down to around $400, and I can see this phone coming down probably just a little bit more, considering that the Zenfone 10 is, I think, still for pre-order right now. But I can see this phone coming down a little bit, and this is a phone that I really liked from last year. So this one has the plastic back and aluminum frame, but the phone itself, it still feels really premium. The plastic back is textured, and I really like the overall design, the really big camera bumps on here as well too. It's IP68 dust and water resistant, and it's actually a compact flagship phone, which is pretty rare these days. So it's a 5.9-inch display. It's Super AMOLED, 120 Hz. It's HDR10 plus with 1100 nits peak brightness, 1080p 445 for the PPI. So if you don't really like these massive phones like the S22 Ultra, with a 6.8-inch display, then this phone you can easily one hand, and it's extremely comfortable to handle. This phone does have Android 13 with the Snapdragon 8 plus Gen 1 chip on here, and it's a fantastic phone when it comes to performance. It performs as you would expect. You get a flagship experience, and you kind of have a kind of stock Android experience kind of on here. As far as Asus skin goes, it's not really too much going on here, which is something that you may like. So yeah, it does fantastic with gaming and all that good stuff. It's 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs on the base model. And then you also have really good stereo speakers. Again, considering the size, a ton of bass coming out these speakers. And what you really like about this phone is that you actually do have a headphone jack on here. So for all of you guys who really need that, physical headphone jack, that is here. You also have, of course, the fingerprint scanner. It's side mounted, it's physical. That's something that I also really loved about this phone. And yeah, the cameras on here I thought were fantastic. It's a 50 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. So of course, with I guess the compact design, I guess they didn't want to add a telephoto lens, but I don't know. That's the only thing it's really missing here. Shoots in 8K24 in a 12 megapixel selfie that also shoots in 4K 60 or 4K 30, excuse me. And the photos I thought were fantastic. This phone actually did a really good job in the MKBHD's smartphone blind test as well too. So I thought the cameras were very impressive. Color, dynamic range, the ultra wide. I thought it did a really good job video as well too. Now, surprisingly, with compact phones, battery life is usually the compromise, but that's not really the case here. This one has a 4300 milliamp hour battery, and battery life was actually, fantastic on this phone. It was really good. It also has 30-watt charging, but this phone does not have any type of wireless charging. But overall, I think this is a fantastic phone to consider, considering the price drop. All right, the next one is the iPhone 13 mini, which a lot of people forgot about, and unfortunately, Apple stopped making the mini series because I guess they weren't selling well. But this is still actually a fantastic phone. It corrected a lot of things that was wrong with the 12 mini. So this phone still has fantastic design. It's aluminum frame. It's IP68 dust and water resistant, and you can find this for like $450 right now. And it's got a super small screen. It's a 5.4 inch display, so it's very easy to one hand. This is the Super Retina XDR OLED display. It's HDR10, 1200 nits peak brightness, 1080p 476 for the PPI. Overall, a fantastic panel here. And of course, you're gonna have iOS 17 on here with the Apple A15 chip. So this phone is extremely fast, so you really honestly don't have to upgrade this phone for the next 6 years probably. But a very fast phone, flies through iOS, gaming, everything is really nice on here. 128 gigs of internal storage and 4 gigs of RAM. Stereo speakers are actually pretty loud, so I always like to see that in these smaller phones. And of course, Face ID and all that good stuff is here, the MagSafe and all that. But this phone still has really good cameras, a 12 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. Essentially, the same cameras that you would find in like the 14 right now. Shoots in 4K 60 and a 12 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 60. And overall, you're gonna get some fantastic shots with this phone. So the best thing about the 13 mini is that it actually has pretty good battery life for its size. That was one thing that they corrected that the 12 mini did not have. So it's got a 2438 milliamp hour battery, and then you have the MagSafe charging along with the standard wireless charging. So you actually get pretty good battery life with this phone. So overall, this is a great phone for anybody looking for a compact phone, and again, which is very rare these days. All right, next is the Pixel 6 Pro. Now I try to put this on my list as much as possible, but I feel like this phone doesn't get enough recognition because of the price that it's at. It's like pretty much at like $250 to $300 depending on the condition that you get it in. But you can get a really good condition for around $300, and this phone is still excellent. It still takes some of the best photos. You guys know I use my Pixel pretty much to film all my shorts, and honestly, when I'm going out and taking pictures, I just really prefer the Pixel image processing in general. But this phone still has a fantastic look. Glass back, aluminum frame. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. It has the LTPO AMOLED display at 120 Hz. It's HDR10 Plus at 6.7 inches. It's a really nice looking display, 1440p resolution, 512 for the PPI. So just a fantastic panel on here. We also have stock Android 13 is going to be on here. And the cool thing about, stock Android phones is that you're the first to get the beta when, let's say, Android 14, 15 comes out. You're the first to be able to test it out. This phone also has 128 gigs of internal storage and 12 gigs of RAM. You have really good, fantastic speakers on here as well too, very loud. And also, going back to the chip, it's got the original Google Tensor chip on it. And the chip on here is actually fine. I think for most people it's fast enough to do, you know, daily tasks, whether it's going in and out of applications. Gaming on here, I have a full gaming test on this phone. It does a decent job. Like I said, it's not going to be as fast as, you know, its competitors that came out that year, but down the line, this phone is definitely 100% fast enough for the average person. So this phone has the under the display fingerprint sensor, which is decent. My only thing with this phone is that it doesn't give the option to do face unlock. This phone also has, again, really great cameras, a 15 megapixel standard, 48 megapixel telephoto with 4 times optical zoom, a 12 megapixel ultra wide in 4K 60 video with 11.1 ultra wide selfie cam that also shoots in 4K 30. And again, fantastic photos with the Pixel. Does great image processing, does really great on skin tones as well too. And overall, I just love the way the photos come out. You have the magic eraser, which is pretty cool. Also, I think video is pretty solid on the Pixel. I personally use Pixels for my YouTube shorts. So overall, I just really love the cameras on the Pixel phones. Now, the battery life on here is just pretty average. It's got a 5,003 milliamp hour battery, 23-watt wired charging with wireless and reverse wireless charging. Overall, you're looking at around like 6 hours of screen on time for my use, so really not that bad, but again, not anything special. Overall, this is a fantastic phone, guys. Now, this one might surprise some of you guys, but here in the States, you know, you can find a Galaxy S23 now for around $500 as well too, which I thought is a fantastic device, especially for anybody who, you know, you're not trying to spend, you know, like $700-800. I think this is a really good phone for this price point as well too, and it's only going to get cheaper as the year goes on. So this phone has an aluminum frame, it's IP68 dust and water resistant. It's a fantastic phone to look at. I really like the design on here as well. And then you also have a 6.1-inch dynamic AMOLED display. It's 120 Hz HDR10 plus, 1750 nits peak brightness, 1080p 425 for the PPI. So again, for anybody who doesn't not want, you know, a massive phone like the S23 Ultra, this definitely is way easier to one hand. Again, this phone has Android 13, One UI 5.1, and then the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 on here is fantastic. It's really fast. Not only that, but it does not heat up like the S22 was when you're doing intense tasks. So that was one thing that I really liked. Gaming and stuff, all that stuff is just really good on this phone. It's relatively cool. It has 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM on board, and I just really like the performance on here, and overall the look of this phone is awesome. Stereo speakers work great on here. Fingerprint scanner under the display, super fast. You have all your flagship features, Samsung desktop support, and basically everything except for the S Pen features, of course. The cameras on here are fantastic, pretty much on par with the S23 Ultra, only, you know, lacking the crazy zoom functionality. Has a 15 megapixel standard, 10 megapixel telephoto with 3 times optical, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It shoots in 8K 24 and also 30, and then you also have a 12 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 60, and of course this is the latest flagship, so you're going to get flagship quality photos. So if you're looking for the best of the best, again, you can get this for, you know, $500 easy. You also have on here really good battery life, surprisingly really good battery life considering the size of this device, and that, I think that's due to the, you know, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 has a 3900 milliamp hour battery, 25-watt wired and wireless and reverse wireless charging. Check out the PUBG drain test I did with this phone. It lasted just as long as the S23 Ultra, getting almost, I think, close to 7 hours of just straight up playing PUBG, which is absolutely insane. So this phone's battery life is really good considering the size. Alright, so that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.